Hi, guys, and welcome to Cozy Talks Live. Man, I have got a lot of stuff to unpack tonight with all the stuff that's been happening this week with one of the members of my Florida amputee community. Some interesting numbers and statistics about hospitals that I think many of you are going to find very interesting. But first, let's get this evening started off right. Cheers. Those of you who have your cool kids Cozy Talks mugs, raise them high. I'd love to know, guys, for those of you who are joining me for the first time, welcome. This crazy over caffeinated Cuban talking to you right now. My name is Cozy Belloso. I am a physical therapist here in hot, sticky, humid, but lovely Tampa, Florida. I've been a PT now for a little over 23 years, and my passion is working with the amputee and limb loss community. So for those of you who are new, because I know we do have some new folks that said they were going to be joining in this week, we have a slight ritual on the show. I need to know who you are, where you're from, and what is in your mug. So I'm going to start saying hello to some of the people that popped on board. We've got Scott coming on board, West Virginia here, Coldwater. Hope you saw my message. I did see your message. You are, as the teenagers would say, you are slaying it, Scott. Your journey and trying and, going through the weight loss journey that you're going through, getting yourself back into your mobility and traveling and getting back out there. I tell you what, Scott, I look forward to hearing all of your emails and your updates. So thank you for including me in that. Jessica, welcome on board. I see that you're a mommy, Jess. You're chiming in from the YouTube channel. You're a new amputee. Welcome, Jessica. This show is for you. It's for the amputee community. If you're an amputee, a family member, a clinician who serves amputees, if you are a caregiver, or sometimes we even have folks who don't have any kind of connection to the amputee community and they like to listen in because, I'm crazy and I'm kind of interesting to listen to sometimes. Just kidding. This show is for you. So any questions that you have, don't be shy, put them into the comments section. We've got Marty coming in from his hot Texas, sipping on some local iced tea. Don't mess with my Texas boy right there. We got Richard also coming in from Texas. It's an invasion, guys. Next, I'm going to see a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader somewhere around here. We got Christy Dayton coming in from Auburn, Nebraska, drinking her iced tea. Richard coming in from Mission. Guys, just as a reminder, I am streaming to Instagram, to YouTube, to Facebook, and now to TikTok because I'm fancy like that. So guys, feel free to jump around the platforms. Give me a shout out from the different ones. Make sure it's working for me because, me and tech, a little sketchy sometimes. We got Emily coming in from rainy Central PA with her Diet Coke. Steve Plitt, and a recent above the knee amputee, how long does it take for my leg to shrink and to walk without assistance, generally speaking? Thanks for your advice and training. Steve, that is an excellent question. We are going to definitely get back to that in just a few minutes. We got Sandy coming in from North Carolina. We got a Tar Heel on board with Starry Zero in her mug. We got Richard coming in with Richard, you're getting fancy. He's got organic Guatemala coffee with Pellegrino. I like the Guatemalan coffee. Guys, I was a little bummed that I couldn't go this summer to Guatemala to work at the Range of Motion project. I want to get back there, and one of those reasons is the coffee and the wonderful people, of course. We've got Jim coming in from Ohio. Jim, your question came in, so I've got an answer for you right here. We've got my girl Marianne coming in from South Dakota. Tom from Maryland. Guys, we've got a great crew on this evening. All right, we got Jessica. She's from Texas. We got a lot of Texans on board. Hey there, Andre and Tatiana. Good to see you. We got John coming in from San Diego. Thanks for joining in. Johnny V from Poughkeepsie, New York, in the Cozy Talks house. Man, I have missed your introductions, Johnny V. I am so glad you are here. We got Pastor David coming in from Maryland with his tea. Let me just check over on our Instagram, folks. We got a few folks on board. We got Beverly, Majas, Lion of God. I like that kind of handle there. We've got Tracy Ignites. How you doing, Tracy? We've got Mola Lachelle. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correct. We got one of my PTs on board, Angela Abernathy. Good to have her there on board. Always love having my fellow PTs on board. All right, guys. So I dropped some serious, cryptic messages this week on Facebook and Instagram. And I usually don't like to do that. But again, it's just kind of a bit of a prolonged story that was unfolding up until this afternoon. So it's something that has happened several times. I've been practicing as a licensed physical therapist for 23 years. I've been in healthcare over 30 years for most of my life. So I've seen and I've worked in every setting you can possibly imagine: hospitals, ICU, trauma, inpatient rehab units, outpatient, skilled nursing facilities, nursing homes, home. I mean, you name it, I've been there, right? I'm like one of those Florida cockroaches. I kind of get in everywhere, right? And I've seen my fair share of stories. But what happened this week is not the first time this has happened, but every time it happens, I just sit there and go, what is wrong here with people? What is wrong here with people? Okay, so let me just get to the point. There was a member of my Florida amputee community. We're going to call him Joe. We're just going to call him Joe. Joe is someone I've known for several years. Wonderful human being. He is a diabetic. He became below the knee amputee as a result of his diabetes. And, you know, since his amputation a few years back, he has been wonderful about caring for himself, about monitoring his sugar, about monitoring his diet, exercising, trying to stay a healthy weight. Okay. And he has the same prosthetist that he started off with when he first had his amputation. Right. And like I said, I've known Joe for several years. And, you know, when he first had the amputation, obviously it was a huge shock to him and you know, his family and not knowing where to go. And, you know, he was assigned a prosthetist by his surgeon. And it was right around this time that I was able to kind of get to know Joe and just kind of talk to him a little bit. And, you know, I was just like, well, do you like the prosthetist you're with? And his answer was, you know, it seems to be doing okay. Okay. So, you know, it was okay. So Joe went back to his life, went back to work, walking independently without a walker or a cane. Like I said, going back to the gym. And then throughout the years, I've touched base with Joe. I do that a lot with my patients, with some of my viewers, especially those in the local Florida community. I'm able to keep in touch a little bit easier with them. And I always got the impression that the prosthetic care was okay, right? But, you know, like many new amputees, I think Joe perhaps thought, well, you know, it's not going to get any better than this, right? So Joe was experiencing some discomfort with his liner and noticed he was starting to develop a blister on the back of his knee. And he went in to see his prosthetist. And by this point, the blister was open enough where he had to put a decent sized bandage on it because it was open and it was starting to ooze, right? And I didn't know this was going on, by the way. And Joe goes to his prosthetist, and his prosthetist is like, oh, and by the way, Joe's been losing weight, process of losing weight. So he goes in and tells the prosthetist, I have an open spot on the back of my knee. Which, guys, the back of the knee, those of you who are below the knee amputees, you guys know that's like a super sensitive area. That is, especially in Florida, heat, humidity, it's just not a fun place to be, right? The back of the knee. And, you know, with a liner on, things can get, you know, uncomfortable, right? So he goes in, tells the prosthetist this. The prosthetist proceeds to just say, you know, maybe we'll change up the liner and we'll put some padding in the socket. And sends Joe on his way. And Joe's thinking to himself, okay, I guess this is the end of it. And a few days later, this ulcer gets bigger. Joe goes to the ER and gets admitted for IV antibiotics. Now, guys, for someone to get admitted for IV antibiotics, that's kind of a big deal. That's kind of a big deal. And it doesn't stop there. Okay, and this is the part that I'm like, so Joe goes to the hospital, and around this point, I come into contact with Joe again. And I'm like, Joe, what's going on, man? What's going on? And he explains what happened. On the inside, I'm just going, oh, right? Because several days had passed between Joe seeing the prosthetist and then getting admitted to the ER, right? So already I'm just sitting there going, oh, for crying out loud, that prosthetist, right? So during the hospital stay, you know, this is a wound in the back of the knee. They had to do some surgical debridement in this wound. So it's not inconsequential, right? And again, IV antibiotics, really tough on the human body. But obviously the bacterial count was enough that they were just like, we gotta, you know. So after a few days, they get the infection somewhat under control, and they're going to send Joe home. Just like that. Joe had not been out of bed for several days. Joe doesn't have wound care experience to be able to dress a complicated wound. And they sent him home with all I can describe as very caveman dressing changes, like very bare minimum dressing changes. And he had to, you know, be an advocate for himself and ask for home health services and ask for the services that common sense would tell you someone in his position would need. Okay. So this is a person who was in bed for several days, and as a result, from the deconditioning and the infection going through the body, was now very deconditioned and could barely get up out of bed. And they were going to just send him home by himself. Here's some dressings, go home. So thankfully, Joe has a wonderful community, and everybody from the community has been contributing. And it just, you know, as the story kept unfolding, you know, it's been several days since Joe's discharge, and we are still waiting on things. We are still waiting for home health services. We are still waiting. And in the meantime, this wound is progressing. So thankfully, between myself and a couple of people, we were able to help him, get him connected in the community to a wound care physician, get the right dressings for that wound. And interestingly enough, as I'm working with Joe and looking at things here at Joe and looking into his wound, and I see the bottom of his limb, and the bottom of his limb is very calloused and it's very discolored. And I'm asking Joe, you know, this obviously did not form overnight. This has been here for a while. And Joe's like, yeah, that's not the way it's supposed to look. And I'm like, no. I go, did your prosthetist see this? And he goes, yeah, I've been several times and it's been that way for a while now. Okay, so guys, we're going to break this down because there's a lot of failures along the way. And by no means, guys, when stuff hits the fan with my amputee patients or my regular patients, I hold my patients accountable just as much as my clinicians, right? If there's things in there, but in this scenario, guys, Joe did everything right. And Joe did everything according to what he knew about what he should do, or, you know, so he did everything the right way, and the system failed him. The system failed him. And you guys hear me talk a lot about this on the show. And I don't think I'll ever stop getting upset about stuff like this. I hope I don't stop getting upset about this. I came home that evening and my poor husband was just like, because I was like ranting and raving. I was like, you are not going to believe, I cannot believe that this happened. It is such a simple thing that could have been prevented. And again, like I said, guys, this kind of scenario is not the first time this has happened. It's not the first time. So again, it goes back to, this is why I do this show, because if any of you here are listening right now, at some point, something like this could potentially happen. And I want you to understand what is right, what is wrong, and what you have the right to do and say about it. Yeah? Okay. So let's go a little bit more into detail. Let's do like a little bit of a deeper dive into this. All right. So first mistake, let's go back to the fact that at the bottom of Joe's residual limb, it was dark and calloused. Okay. So it looks like a cup, guys. If I had to, if I can get my bag of tricks here. I think my kids have been messing in my toolbox again. Okay. So basically the end of the stump, the skin there should look exactly like the skin on your residual limb. Okay. So it should not look different is what I'm trying to say. Healthy skin on a residual limb should not look different at the bottom just because it's on the bottom, even if you're diabetic, Okay. When someone has like that callousing on the bottom of their residual limb like that, okay, that means that there's movement going on. There's movement going on in the socket. There's movement going on in that liner. That means something is not fitting right. Okay. It also means that there's probably some pistoning going on, right? So you're actually compromising the blood flow there at the bottom. And that's why the skin starts to get calloused. It starts to have friction on the bottom. Okay. And on a person who's not diabetic, that's not good. On a person who's diabetic, and then on top of that, many of my diabetics may not necessarily feel this because they may have neuropathy. So the skin at the bottom of their residual limb, they're not going to feel it. Okay. So this is why step one, if you are diabetic, you need to be checking your residual limb. Take a little hand mirror, a little compact mirror, take your phone, the camera on your phone, and look all over your residual limb every day. Also the same for your foot, the sound foot. You need to be looking underneath the foot, in between the toes. You need to catch anything that is not looking right away. Okay, so now let's talk about the blister. Okay, blisters happen, guys. Unfortunately, blisters happen. And here in hot, sticky, again, humid Florida, you are constantly fighting sweat. And right now, all across the United States, judging by the drinks that you guys have in your cups right now, you all are also battling the heat and you're going to be battling sweat. And you have to stay on top of it. Okay, you've got to keep that skin healthy. If a blister happens, guys, game over with your socket. Game over. Okay, that socket does not go back onto your limb until that blister is completely healed, especially in these hot summer months. Is it inconvenient and a pain in the butt? Yeah, because it means you either have to use a walker, crutches, or even perhaps a wheelchair until that wound heals. Okay, but especially if you're diabetic. And this is where, again, I put the onus on the prosthetist on this one. I am calling that prosthetist out. Okay, first of all, that prosthetist should have seen the callusing on the bottom of that residual limb months ago because that did not form overnight. That's been there for months. Okay, and I know Joe has been back to this prosthetist in the past months. And second of all, whenever any of my patients come and tell me, I have a little something, or I scraped my skin, or I have a hangnail, okay? The first thing I say is, show me. Show me. Nope, I don't care if this is going to delay our treatment by 10 more minutes. I'll give you 10 more minutes at the end of treatment. Show me. That's it. That's all it takes as a clinician, guys. And if you're diabetic, well, you're definitely going to be showing me for sure. For sure. I don't care if it's a paper cut on your residual limb. I want to see it. Basic clinical care. No excuses. No excuses to this prosthetist. Okay, so there, those two mistakes right there. Third mistake. Okay, let's say you were really having a brain fart of a day as a clinician and you didn't ask to see the blister that your patient, your diabetic patient said that they had. What did the prosthetist do? Oh, well, we'll just pad your socket to take the pressure off the blister. No. No. Sorry. Patient takes off the socket and leaves it off until the blister is healed. Because when you put padding into a socket to relieve pressure, you're causing pressure in a different area. Guess who taught me that? A prosthetist. Okay. Right, guys? So lots of stuff here. And guys, when I have a patient who has skin breakdown, especially my diabetics, that definitely gets my heart rate up. There's a saying in the NICU, like when I worked very briefly in NICU way at the beginning of my career in the neonatal intensive care unit. And the one at Jackson is I think, still one of the top ranked in the United States. I mean, we saw micro preemies, beautiful, small, tiny, tiny little babies. And one of the things that the nurses taught me as a therapist, they would say, never trust a NICU baby. And I was like, well, what does that mean? I was a very new therapist. And they said with NICU babies, they can look like they're perfectly fine. And then from 1 minute to the next, you turn your eyes away and oxygen starts to go down. Okay. Meaning what they were trying to say is you got to watch them like a hawk and don't ever let your guard down when you have a NICU, a preemie baby, right? For me, I apply that kind of a saying to my diabetics. Never trust diabetic skin. I trust my diabetics. I just don't trust their skin. Okay, so guys, I don't care if it's like a little paper cut, a little abrasion, or a blister. I'm going to be watching it like a hawk. Going to be watching it like a hawk. And I will be giving my patient instructions. This is what you need to do to make sure it doesn't progress into something worse. And if I do have a diabetic patient who presents with a blister, and I'm like, okay, let's take care of it this way, send them home the next day. Send me a picture, please. What is the update? Because those things can turn on a dime, guys. They really can. And guys, any of you who want to go ahead and, put your comments in on this, because I know there's got to be some of you guys out there who have had some of these similar experiences. In fact, let's go see. I see lots of comments coming in right now. We got, Ben Gregory's coming in. Katie from Kingdom Counseling is on board. Katie, stick around because we're going to be talking about you in just a minute, darling. Ronnie says, very sadly, this is such a common occurrence in amputee healthcare. Yeah. And Ronnie's a great prosthetist, so I know he's on top of his patients. We got Lynette Mena coming in from beautiful North Carolina. Comadre, it's good to see you. Emily says, wound care at the rehab skilled nursing home that my mom is at is better than what she was getting in the hospital. She's not an amputee, but she is a type 2 diabetic. Yes. And Emily, we're going to talk a little bit about what your options are. Ronnie says, biggest thing I promote to the amputee community and my patients is maintaining proper limb health. Amen. Amen to that. We got Francis coming in from Orlando. Richard saying, yep. Ronnie says, sores and blisters need to be offloaded. And the best way is parking your prosthesis for a few days. Yes. And guys, I know I'm going to get some of you who are going to be like, well, I get blisters and I just put on some Tegaderm and I go about my day. Look, guys, whatever you do to go about your day, I'm just saying what I tell my own patients. Okay, I'm just telling you what I tell my own patients. And this goes for my diabetic patients. And this also goes for my super young athletic patients. You know, I have amputee runners, and unfortunately, they get blisters because, again, running, Florida, sweat, iguanas, right? Blisters can happen, right? So they can either continue to try to put their socket back on and they're just going to keep rubbing that blister raw, or they can just leave it off for a day or two. And if they're young and healthy, it'll heal nice and quickly, and then they can keep going on with their movement, okay? Frances says, my prosthetist always checks my limb. She touches it. She feels it. And anything that she sees that doesn't look right, she brings it to my attention. I get a lot of rashes and she's helped me with ideas and things I can do to make sure I don't get a rash. I like her and she checks up on me. I will get a text and a phone call to see how everything's going. That's how it's done. That's how it's done. That's it, guys. And it doesn't take much. And the thing is, guys, we have so many resources available to us. You know, when it comes to wound care, I'm awesome at wound care. I am awesome at debriding wounds. That's one of my strengths. I stink at rashes. Okay. And I know it sounds weird to say that as a client, but I stink at rashes. I will look at a rash and I'll be like, that's a heat rash, or it could be a fungal rash, or it could be a bacterial. Like, for me, rashes have just always been my Achilles heel. But what does that mean? When my patient comes in with a rash, I'm calling someone to help me identify it right away. I'm not going to sit on that and just say, well, it's really not within my scope to diagnose this rash. It may not be within my scope to diagnose it, but I certainly know people who it is within their scope. And as a clinician, I refer them to those people. That's it. That's it. And guys, I've had stories of younger clinicians that they, you know, see something with wounds and things like that. They'll send me a picture and they'll say, you know, what am I supposed to do with this? And I can help counsel them. That's how healthcare should be working, with communication like that. Emily says, I have spina bifida and a blister is why I'm an amputee. And that makes me so sad, guys. That makes me so sad. And again, I don't put the blame on my patients. I hold my patients responsible in saying, look, now that you've come to see me and I have educated you on this, this is the process. If you have a blister, this is what you do. We want to prevent the blisters. Therefore, we do this, 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 and this. If there's any doubt in your mind, you call me. My patients all have my cell phone number. Like, they have my cell phone number and they know that I answer right away. Okay. But that's the whole reason that you're going to a clinician. Okay. And guys, we have that training. That's part of what we're supposed to do. Right. Let's see. John C says, I had this issue with my first below the knee amputation. Larry says, I had my first prosthetic person do this and I've had 5-year issues. Okay. Jamar from Ohio, right above the knee, amputee. Much love to everyone. Hello, Cozy. Hey there, Jamar. Let's see. Marianne says, I ended up with a bone infections one day after I went to the doctor and new different doctor. And guys, like I said, these things flip on a dime. Flip on a dime. And so now I want to kind of just move forward with, okay. And then on top of that, so that's what happened before Joe went into the hospital. Then after Joe went into the hospital, you know, and I worked in the hospital for many years, and this was a constant frustration where, you know, I would be working on a particular floor and I would see a patient that wasn't assigned to me. It wasn't a patient that had been ordered for physical therapy. And I would see that person day after day after day, just in the bed, in the bed, in the bed, in the bed. And I'm just sitting there going, that person is losing mobility. Whatever they have going on, they're losing mobility. Sure enough, a few days later, yeah, we need a physical therapy consult. We're sending this patient home today. Really, guys? And guys, this is like, you talk to any physical therapist who's working on an acute care unit, they'll be like, yeah, that happens all the time, right? But again, this is where I want to give you guys a little bit of information, the behind the scenes look. If you should happen to find yourself in the hospital, God forbid, but should you find yourself readmitted into the hospital, even if you're already independent with your walking as an amputee, okay, this is where I want to put the responsibility on you, okay? Get out of bed. Get yourself out of bed. Hoop, holler, squeak the wheel. Get the nurses, if you need help, to get yourself out of bed. And if you are not moving independently as you were when it's time for you to go home, this is where you also need to squeak the wheel and say, I need either home health services and sending physical therapy to the home, or I need to be sent to an inpatient rehab facility so that I can recover my mobility before I go home again. Guys, I can't tell you how many times patients like this will get sent home, no mobility, and then 2 days later, they're back in the hospital because they've been lying in bed and they can't move, and they develop pneumonia or their infection gets worse. And it's simple things. This is what kills me, guys. It's simple things that we can do to, prevent a bad situation from getting worse. All right. So let's talk a little bit about wounds, because this is something I feel very, very strongly about. And then, sorry, I'm going to take some of that. All right, guys. So when it comes to wounds, right? If you're sitting there and you're going, well, shoot, I've had a wound on my leg, what do I do? And guys, again, 9 out of 10 prosthetists, good people, good eggs, love working with them. It's unfortunately just the one prosthetist sometimes. And guys, like I said, I've had many occasions where patients have come in to see me and they have an open wound on their leg that is seeping through the bandage, right? And I'm sitting there going, all right, we got to get this thing cleaned up. We got to see what's going on in there. And I go, has anyone else seen this? I can't be the first person to be seeing this ulcer. And guys, I've had it told to me, yeah, I went to my prosthetist and they casted right over it. I can't make this up, guys. And I'm like, did they even bother to look under the band? No, the bandage was seeping and weeping and they just cast it over it. And I'm just sitting there going, oh dear heavens. Okay. So what should you do if you're, you're developing an ulcer, you're developing a wound? Okay. My first recommendation is a wound care center. Okay. And guys, oftentimes I tell you, when it comes to your care as an amputee, you have a team and you need a team. In that team, you have your primary care doctor, you have a physical therapist. Okay, whether or not you're actively seeing that physical therapist, they should be somewhere in that panorama. You should have a physical therapist on board, okay, or occupational therapist. Mental health support, and we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. Nutritional support. This is something that I've become a lot more vocal about in the past few years, the importance of having nutritional dietary support. And there's so many different opportunities out there for you to have that. But another thing is if you are prone to getting blisters and ulcers and you're diabetic or you have vascular disease, any of these issues, a wound care center is something that you need to have in your Rolodex. Totally revealing my age right there with that one. Okay. And thankfully nowadays, guys, like for Joe, I was just like, okay, it's been a minute since I've had to refer. Boom, automatically on Google, I typed in wound care center next to me and I had like 3 options that popped up. Okay. And then I was also able to call a doctor. I was like, oh wait, I know one of the doctors here that he runs a wound care clinic. Like this is all they see day after day after day after day. Okay. That's who needs to take care of the wound. Okay. One mistake that happens, and I'm very careful when I say this because I do have a lot of respect for my doctors. A lot of times, okay, a patient will go to their primary doctor, whether it's an internal medicine, family practice, perhaps the endocrinologist because they're diabetic, and they'll say, hey, I've got this wound. Doctor may not know how to treat that. Okay, unless that doctor specifically sees a lot of wound care themselves, they're not going to know how to treat that wound, guys. It's just not in their current scope. Okay. And that happened to one of my patients where thankfully their doctor did not know how to do this, but the doctor accepted the recommendations that my team was giving them. And we got all the right things that we needed to take care of this person's wound, right? But you need to find a wound care center. Okay, these guys see wounds left and right with their eyes closed. They can identify exactly how it needs to be dressed, if they need a wound vac or not, whatever kind of ointments that go on there to eat away at that dead tissue. They can also do those debridements, and they can really stop a wound in its tracks. And that's something you want to jump on quickly. Unfortunately, with the way our third-party payer systems are with insurance, insurance will drag its heels. And when it comes to wounds, you can't wait. You cannot wait. Those things will change in 24 hours. Okay? So let's see. Van Gregory says, do not wear your prosthesis with blisters. No. Big no. Let's see. Jamar says, I want a running blade, need help getting one, info on getting one. Jamar, one of the things you can do is look up on some of the grants. First one I usually recommend is the CAF grant, Challenge Athletes Foundation. They do a lot of grants where they provide amputees with running blades. So that might be one of the first places you want to check. All right. Bill says, got yelled at for doing that because my local team was inexperienced as I was using my prosthetic for 3 days with one, and my nurse who knew better told me to leave him off for the rest of the week. And guys, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, just take off your leg. It's no big deal. I know it's a big deal. I know it's a big deal to have to keep your leg off and wait for that dang blister, whatever it is, to heal. And you've got a life to live in the meantime. Right? And again, this is something that when I work with patients, when I'm working with them as a new amputee, teaching them how to use prosthetics, I try to think ahead and think, okay, what could potentially be a problem for this patient? How can I help set them up for success? And one of the things I might say is, how do we prevent falls? What happens if we do fall? You guys have heard me talk about that in the past. Another thing is if you have skin breakdown. If you have skin breakdown, this is our protocol. This is what you need to do. And that includes calling me about it, right? But then also going back to using a walker or crutches or wheelchair, whatever is going to provide you with the most amount of independence with your mobility and safety with it as well, right? And guys, it needs to be healed, completely healed. And keeping in mind that when you go back to wearing your prosthesis, that skin over that site that just healed is going to be new baby skin. Okay, so you have to ease back into wearing that prosthesis. And then the other very, very, very important thing is addressing the reason why. Why did the skin breakdown happen? Now, in Joe's case, we know because he was losing weight, hot, sticky, sweaty, humid Florida. The liner was too big, and we were starting to see that because the bottom of his limb was getting that callus anyways, right? So it's very easy to see this is why he got a blister on the back of his knee. Okay, so we can fix that problem. Joe's going to get himself a new prosthetist, by the way. Okay, but finding out what was the root cause of the problem. Because if you don't solve the root cause, you're going to keep getting blisters and skin openings, right? And that's where the prosthetist comes in and works their magic. Hey, Ashley, girl, I haven't seen you in a long time. Are you enjoying your summer vacation from school right now? Bill says, is it the same for spider and flea bites? That's a really good question. And again, in Florida, everything here is like flying around, trying to bite you, eat you. Yeah, we got all sorts of fun stuff here in Florida, right? I would say yes. The spider bites, and again, okay, it's a nuanced thing. It's a nuanced thing, Bill. For my diabetics, yeah. Like I said, I don't trust diabetic skin. Never trust diabetic skin, okay? And sometimes these spider bites, especially the ones that get really big and nasty and itchy and like the chafing rubbing up against that skin that's red and hot and inflamed, that's just kind of asking for a disaster right there, okay? Your average mosquito bite here and there, again, it depends on how you react. If you have a lot of issues, you have a lot of problems with your circulation, you have a lot of problems with sensation, okay, you're diabetic, maybe you have lymphedema, then yes, bug bites can be very dangerous and you have to watch them carefully. Watch them carefully. And again, with the spider bites, for me, I'm just like, it's always best just to take a look and see what's going on, guys. Always better to take a look and see what's going on. Andrea says, so many insurances are denying inpatient or subacute rehab and no wheelchair if you can walk 50 feet or more. Crazy. It is crazy. I will say this, though, and I didn't used to recommend this, but now I'm just like, whatever, desperate times, desperate measures. On a side note, I love thrifting and antique shopping and consignment shopping. Like, that's my jam. My kids and I love to go out and just find antique stores and thrifting stores. I always take a look in the homewares section, plethora of wheelchairs, crutches, walkers, bedside commodes, all sorts of durable medical equipment. And some of this stuff, it's brand new. Like it still has the tags on it. Now, legally, as a responsible licensed clinician, I'm not supposed to recommend that you guys use used durable medical equipment. There, I said it. So hopefully we can appease the liability gods. The mom of four in me says, use common sense. Use common sense, guys. If you need a wheelchair, you can go to one of your Goodwill stores and one of these things and just use common sense. Look to see if it's in good condition. You can actually, like, for example, we have a wonderful mom and pop pharmacy in town. Like it's like old school pharmacy. I love this place. It's called Bill's Pharmacy, and I hope they never go out of business, right? They do compounding and things that other pharmacies don't do. But if you take your wheelchair to one of these places, like a mom and pop pharmacy, they'll take a look at it and let you know, is it in good shape? If it's not in good shape, if it's missing a screw here and there, we can help tighten it up and fix it up, okay? Again, common sense. But that's one of the things I've been recommending a little bit more often to some of my patients that perhaps need that wheelchair and the insurance won't cover it for them for that reason. Richard says, team and your own advocate. Yep, got to squeak that wheel. Got to squeak that wheel. Ashley says, my wound care was not helpful. Discharged me after 8 weeks because I scraped the callus, but it comes back each week. My primary care was not happy and sent me to ortho, but ortho wanted to touch this and vascular is not a procedure. And yeah, you guys might find this sometimes like the hot potato scenario where this doctor doesn't want to handle it, this doctor doesn't want to handle it, that person doesn't want to handle it. It's a pain. It is totally, totally a pain. And I will say, like in Miami, when I lived in Miami for many years, I had my network of people. I had my people. So if any of my patients had a problem, I'm like, go to this person and go to that person because I know they're going to take care of you and they're not going to wait and let your wound fester. Here, I'm building those connections as well. And that's what I encourage you guys to do, especially in the best time to build the connections, guys, is before you have your crisis. And I know, and it's hard because if you're like, well, nothing's wrong with me, life is good. But unfortunately, when you run up against these crises and you're just in like, reactionary mode, and you're having to just go wherever your insurance tells you to go or wherever your doctor tells you to go, and you're just hoping that it's the right place, that can go either way for you. It can either be a fine experience or not. Okay, so again, just letting you guys know, if you're someone who is prone to blistering, you're diabetic, you have vascular issues, you have any other medical issues that would potentially complicate an ulcer, just start researching in your area. Who would it be that you would go to should things turn south? And hopefully they won't. Knock on wood, right? Sean says, I know Cosi talks that you have told me that your patients love their vacuum system, having the worst time with this. Oh, Sean, I know you're having problems with that vacuum. I've never had skin issues with my pin and lock. Sometimes the latest isn't the greatest, so unhappy, but I'm working on getting back to pin and lock system. Yeah, and again, this is talking about suspension systems on how sockets are held onto the leg. And yeah, Sean, again, what works for one person is not going to work for the other. Vacuums, elevated vacuum, I have personally a love-hate relationship. For the patient that it works for, it works beautifully. It makes the person feel like they are so connected with their leg. But then I just see the flip side to that. And the person who's constantly having skin issues, who's constantly having a problem with the mechanics of the vacuum pump, and it just becomes a hassle. And Sean, don't think of it as a failure, because I know people are like, ooh, elevated vacuum. It's like really cool, high technology, blah, 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 blah. Sean, I have just as many people who are high athletes that are using a pin lock system, or they're using suction suspension without vacuum. Okay. So it truly is, what is it that's going to work for you, that's going to keep your skin healthy, that's going to keep that leg comfortably on, and it's going to allow you to do what it is that you want to do. David says, my prosthetist examines my leg all the time. If there's a hint of a hot spot or a blister, it stays out of the prosthesis for a few days. Thank you. That's how it's done, guys. That's how it's done. Ashley says, totally enjoying summer break. I go back to work officially on August 4th, but I'm going tubing Friday for the first time since my amputation. That sounds like fun. Okay, guys, I do want to talk about a wonderful human being. Speaking of making those connections in the community, because I was going to talk about her last week, and unfortunately, yay, okay. Unfortunately, we did not get to it. So I want to get to it now. I had an absolutely lovely lady by the name of Katie Colding reach out to me. I had done a presentation, Hanger? I can't remember. I think I was doing a presentation with Hanger. And she was in the audience and she reached out to me. She is in the Tampa Bay area. Actually, I think she's more out towards St. Pete and Clearwater. Correct me if I'm wrong, Katie. I hope you're still on board listening in to see if you can chime in as well. She is a licensed social worker and she has a private practice for counseling. Okay. Guys, this was so exciting for me because even though I've been practicing, I've had my private practice here in Tampa Bay for 7.5 years. And obviously I've been a therapist for much longer, but I still feel like I have trouble making certain connections with certain services, and mental health is something that I still feel like I wish I had more. I wish I had more I could offer my patients. So when Katie reached out to me, I was so excited to hear that she's right here in my backyard. She's an amputee herself. So she's been there, done that, has the t-shirt, right? She's a social worker, which for me, especially when I worked in hospitals, I loved working with social workers. They're just angels without wings here on earth. And then on top of that, she has a private practice for mental health counseling. Okay, guys, on the show, you've heard me say many times, healing from a trauma is physical, emotional, and spiritual. You gotta address all three. If you're not addressing all three, it's not going to happen. And this healing process is lifelong. So whether you're going through cancer, like I did a few years back, or whether you're going through amputation or any other kind of physical trauma crisis like that, you need physical, emotional, and spiritual. Okay. So mental health can come in many different ways. It can come through support groups. It can come through peer support. It can come through a member of the clergy. It can come through a social worker who has a private practice for counseling. Okay. So guys, I have that QR code there. Click that QR code. Just take a look at her website, show her some love. She is able to do telehealth within Florida. So even though she's in the Tampa Bay area like I am, she can see anybody in the Florida area for telehealth, and she accepts insurance. She accepts most major insurances, and I hope I got that right. Okay. So guys, I'm going to leave that QR code up for another couple of minutes. And if you're in the Tampa Bay area, I would encourage you just to have that and just store that into your phone and just have that on hand just in case. All right, let's get back over here. Larry says, my current prosthetist person never looks at my stump. That makes me sad, but quizzes me on, do I have any issues? Okay. That's like a C plus, Larry. It's a C plus. Okay. At some point, even on your established patients, just take a look. Just take a look. Okay. It's just, and honestly, for me, I'm like, guys, it's not hard to do. Like in physical therapy, when my patients are coming to see me, their legs are coming on and off, on and off, on and off. It's no thing for me just to be like, hang on, let me look. Okay, good to go. 10 seconds, 10 seconds. Right? So asking your patient if they have any issues, yeah, okay, that's great, but you still need to look. And not because you think your patient is lying, no, but just sometimes people might miss something. And not to mention, it's your job. So look. Just saying. And here's the other thing I don't understand is like, guys, this is stuff that we have to document in the clinical record. Okay. So if you're documenting in the clinical record and people are taken to court on this, if you're documenting in the clinical record, patient skin is clear and intact, that means that you checked the patient's skin, right? So if you're saying patient skin intact, clear, dry, whatever it is you're saying, that means you, the clinician, checked the skin. And if you write in the record, patient states they have no problems with their skin, but then you don't follow it up by saying that you observed it yourself, it's kind of a liability for you too. Just saying. Just saying. And I know the prosthetists watching this show, they know this. I don't have to tell them this. Okay. It's for the folks in the back of the room. Okay. I know. It's like a huge soapbox. Ronnie says, I've seen this often as well from amputees throughout the community, patients well-being taking a backseat to pumping monthly numbers, and it's heartbreaking. Yeah. And guys, again, I just keep going to the same thing. It takes a few seconds. takes a few seconds to check this, and you can prevent so many problems. So many problems here. All right, we got some folks jumping in on Instagram, guys. Hello to my Instagram folks over there. Don't be shy. Let me know if you have any questions. Harsh says, just came back from Miami, Florida. So many iguanas. Yes, we have iguanas everywhere. The most fun, Harsh, is when it's wintertime here. And here it gets down to a respectable 30 and 40 degrees. And at that point, it's true, guys. The iguanas freeze and they fall from the trees. That is not an urban myth. It's not an urban legend. It is true. So if you ever come to Florida in the winter and you happen to see an iguana lying on the ground like this, and they look like they're frozen and dead, leave them alone. Leave them alone, because when the degree starts to warm up during the day, they thaw out and they skitter off and they're fine. Yes, we have iguanas falling from trees. It's awesome. I love living in Florida. Larry says, my PT person quizzes me on my residual limb. I still have issue 5 years later and 5 wound debridements. Yeah. And guys, there are some of you who are going to be prone to having skin issues. You know who you are, right? You know who you are. Your clinicians should also know who you are, right? And they should be on top of that. Okay. Sean says, I have a slight lip in my, yeah, man, you got to get yourself back to a pen lock, Sean. Ronnie says, elevated vacuum is an amazing system for promoting great limb health, but can be a disaster if elevating vacuum is not done properly, especially if the vacuum is above 15 inches of mercury. Yeah. And then Ronnie, it goes back to, and again, every prosthetist I've spoken to, they have their opinion on it. I'm of the opinion of just like, okay, it's something else that you're adding to the socket, right? It's something else that you're adding to the socket. And you have to weigh the pros and cons of, does the patient want to have to deal with this? And does the, you know, so again, some patients I've had, the elevated vacuum is a dream, and it really does change their quality of life for better. And others are just like, oh dear heavens, get this thing off of me. I'm done. I'm done. So, you know, see, Crystal says the mental health part of being an amputee can be really tough at times. Glad you're talking about it. We talk about it all the time, Crystal. I am not a mental health counselor. I am not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist, but as a physical therapist, I have to address my patient's mental health. Okay. I'm asking my patients to do all sorts of crazy, sometimes even painful things during physical therapy. And I need them to participate and be compliant and be cooperative and collaborate with me to get them to where they need to be with their mobility goals. If things aren't right up here and things aren't right in here, things are not going to be right down there. Okay. So yeah, it's important to talk about it. It's important to address it, and it's important to find what is it that's going to work for you. Some people don't like support groups. Some people like the one-on-one counseling. Some people prefer to see someone who has a clinical background, like a psychologist or psychiatrist or a social worker. Okay. There's something out there for everyone. Something out there for everyone. All right. Richard says, calling my wound care doctor tomorrow. Callus, rough skin, top of surgical site. Thank you. Okay. And guys, honestly, yeah. And this goes back to, I don't forget this. I don't know why this conversation just sticks in my head that I had with my father. You know, my father was my guy. You know, and years ago when I really started focusing on amputee care, and, you know, my father's an Army veteran, so he knew his fair share of people who had lost limbs through the service and things like that. And he just kind of looked at me. He's just like, so these amputee patients of yours, they're just having to live with calluses and blistering on their skin for the rest of their life. Is that just part of the normal thing? I'm like, no, Dad. And I said, Dad, that's an old way of thinking. That's not how it's, I don't know why that conversation always stuck in my head, that I remember having that conversation with my dad, but it is something that I find that I have to talk about a lot with patients, and saying, no, blisters and callusing are not normal part of being an amputee. I mean, normal part of being an amputee, yes, but should not be. Does that make sense, guys? Right? It's a symptom that something is not well. It's a symptom that something is not fitting right with the socket. Okay, that and pain. That's the other part of it that you guys always hear me about. All right, so Kingdom Counseling. So Katie says, yes, I'm in Tampa. My office is in Safety Harbor, but I can work with anyone in Florida. So guys, I see a few of you clicked on that QR code. So, you know, again, I will have that QR code on hand. So anytime anybody, I'll probably put it up at least once a show, just for anybody who's in the Florida area to have her number available. Johnny says, so in January, does what happens in Vegas have to stay in Vegas? Are you referring to the Amputee Coalition National Conference, Johnny? I'm not even sure if I'm going. I don't know. I have to talk to my sponsors and see if anybody wants to take me along to the Amputee Coalition National Conference. It's a little early yet, but let's just do a cozy poll. Is anybody already planning on going? I believe it's in, I don't know the exact dates, but I think it's in January, and it's in Vegas. I've never been to Vegas. Mildly curious. Emily says, I'm still adjusting to wearing a prosthesis regularly. I have lymphedema and volume changes can be an issue. The reason I had to take a break from my prosthesis was because my prosthesis and liner did not fit. I know about adjustable sockets, but how do you wear a liner and keep it on if you have volume issues? I feel like some days the liner fits well, other days it might be too tight or too loose, especially if I'm active. So Emily, in your case, you are definitely an outlier. And there was a question earlier, and I do apologize. There was somebody at the very beginning of the show who was asking about their limb changing volume all the time. I apologize for taking so long to answer your question, but we're going to talk about that right now. So when you have your amputation, right, your limb is going to be changing volume those first 2 years after amputation, 1.5 to 2 years. And it's basically the stages of healing. So whenever there's an injury to the body, and guys, I did some really lovely videos with Click Medical. They sponsored me doing some of those educational videos. It's on their website, and I really need a QR code for that so you guys can go watch those videos. But anyways, the phases of healing means that your residual limb is undergoing a lot of changes. It's going to puff up, it's going to shrink down. It's going to puff up again, it's going to shrink down. Up and down, up and down. And then as you start to wear your prosthesis, you're really going to see some dramatic changes, right? Within minutes of wearing your prosthesis and putting some weight into it, you may start to see that limb start to shrink right away. You take the prosthesis off and then it bounds out again, right? And so this goes on for 2 years. And over the course of the 2 years, your limb will hopefully achieve a stable shape and size, and that you are able to at least predict the volume changes at that point. Emily, in your case, with the lymphedema, you're going to have even more dramatic volume changes, and those are going to be a lifelong thing for you. If you're seeing that liner, okay, is getting loose even just throughout the day, I would actually go to your prosthetist and see about getting fit for a second liner. Okay. And I know this might be a little tough through insurance, but I would say go to your prosthetist and ask if you can be fit for a liner when you're on the puffier side with the lymphedema and when you're on the slimmer side with lymphedema. Like, finding a day where you're having a normal day where you're going up and down in your normal pattern and get fit for perhaps 2 different liners. Ronnie, if you're still on board, or any of my other prosthetists want to jump in on this one for a solution, I'd welcome your opinions on this one. Harsh says, I also gave up on vacuum. Hey there, Dulcie from Ohio. Let's see what else we got going on. Crystal says, I'm a new amputee as of March 10th, and the mental health has been harder than the healing, but what you said makes sense. Absolutely, Crystal. And again, I from a professional standpoint, I see this in my patients a lot. And as a clinician, I always try to ask, how are they doing? You know, what's going on between the ears? On a personal level, like I said, I had breast cancer when I was the ripe old age of 36, and I had 4 small children, and I had to do lots of surgeries and lots of chemo. I actually talked a little bit about that on my reel that I posted this past week. And that does a number on you, right? I say this, and I'll keep saying this for whoever needs to hear it. Cancer is not normal. Amputation is not normal. These are not normal things that are supposed to happen to the human body, right? Making babies, having babies, becoming moms, you know, getting a career, getting a job in your life. You know, those are the normal things. Those are the normal fun things in life, right? Amputation and cancer, no, definitely not among the normal things that we would expect to happen to us in our life, right? So you need help working through that, and then building your life again afterwards, and understanding that during that process, hopefully coming to that realization of, you know, life will never be the same. You will not be the same person you were before amputation. You're not going to be the same person you were before cancer, but it doesn't mean that life won't be good. All right. Larry says, my son is a licensed professional counselor and treats amputees. He has gotten into this portion of counseling because of my challenges, and he is in Illinois. Larry, if you want to throw up your son's credentials up there and maybe a website or anything that he has, and if there's anybody in Illinois who's listening in, they might need to have that name as well. Dulcie asks the $1 million question. What do you do for sweating in Florida to keep the skin healthy? And as I'm saying this, I'm like sweating right now in my air conditioning house. Oh. Okay, so the biggest thing is staying on top of it and being consistent. I usually tell my patients, and this goes for year round, guys, to have like a little pack, whether it's a fanny pack, a zipper pouch, or something like that. In that zipper pouch, okay, they need to have a little washcloth, a spray bottle that is half alcohol, half water, and clean socks. Okay. So what I tell my amputees to do is a couple of times a day, depending on if they're working inside in the air conditioning or just, walking around. I mean, guys, here in Florida, I'm not exaggerating, just walking from your house to get into your air conditioned car and you're already breaking a sweat. But taking your leg off more than one time per day, spritzing your residual limb down with that alcohol water solution, drying it with that terry cloth, and then cleaning the inside of your liner. Okay, not with the terry cloth because then I get us all the fuzzies, but spritzing the inside with alcohol, that alcohol water solution, drying it, make sure everything is super bone dry, and then reapply everything. And that's during the day. That is what's going to help get you through the day. Okay. It's like, when people are out and about and they get all sweaty and they have to change their shirts throughout the day sometimes in Florida, it happens. That's how you just have to think about your residual limb. And then what you do afterwards. Okay. Once every 24 hours, that limb needs to be washed. Okay. It is sitting under plastics all day long. It's not open to air all day. It's sitting under plastic. So once every 24 hours, you need to just go and run water on it, whether it's a bath or a shower, run water and simple soap. Nothing that's stripping, nothing that is aggressive, doesn't have to be antibacterial unless your doctor recommended it. Soap, and then washing the inside of that liner. Okay. I do a lot of talks on this one right there, but a lot of it is maintaining the cleanliness of the liner and maintaining the cleanliness of the residual limb. Okay. Healthy skin, okay, is going to sweat. We need to sweat because that's how we get the toxins out of our body. Okay. So we can't stop ourselves from sweating, but we can certainly try to manage it during those hotter months. I love the Vital Fit. Let me see if I have my code here. The Vital Fit skincare solution. I love it. It is made specifically for folks wearing prosthetics. I'm just going to give you guys Vital Fit SR. Okay, guys, if you type into Google what I just typed right there, Vital Fit SR, they have a whole skincare line specifically for amputees, and it's really great at balancing the skin. Like I said, it's not going to stop you from sweating, but it's going to minimize the odor and the bad bacteria, the kind of bacteria we don't want that causes the odor and things like that. And it keeps it nice and healthy. Denise says, good advice from Cozy. My 2 cents. There is life after amputation, full and vibrant life, one day at a time with your healing. Yes. Yes. Ronnie says, many of my patients of mine get prescription sweat wipes from their doctor. I believe they're called Kubrexa. Okay. And again, I'm kind of more old school, Ronnie. And again, whatever works at the end of the day, like you got to do what works for you, right? I tend to be a little bit more old school. I just like simple soap and water, keeping it dry, having a skincare routine. Like I said, the Vital Fit one, it's very simple to maintain. They have a nighttime moisturizer that's really nourishing for the skin. They also have a liquid to powder lotion that works wonderfully during the daytime, and it doesn't get gummy, and you can layer it on, and that helps to prevent the chafing and the friction there. John says, instead of spritz, is there wet wipes that is appropriate? I don't like wet wipes, guys. And I'm sorry, I know there's some of you who probably use the wet wipes, and here's why, and you're going to laugh a little bit. I actually learned that wipes were not great when I had 4 babies. And just stay with me for a second on this one, guys. I had 4 babies, and they were, I nursed my babies. And those of you who have had kids, and if you or if you're a woman or if your wife was nursing the babies who are nursing, they have more runny poopy. right? That's just the nature of that, right? So it means that they are more prone to diaper rashes, right? And I would sit there with the wipey and trying to wipe and wipe and wipe, and they were clean, but they always had rashes until finally I went into the pediatrician, and he was this old school Cuban pediatrician, and he just picks up my baby by, I mean, she's a little newborn. She's like, ah, screaming her head off. And he gets her little bum and he puts it under the sink, and then he just rinses her bum with water. He goes, that's how you clean a baby's bum and prevent diaper rashes. He goes, forget about the wipies. He was right, guys. He was absolutely right. Because basically it's just the film that's left on the skin, and sometimes you can't see that film, whether it's poopies or whether it's sweat. The wipes just kind of like smear stuff around. Okay. Now, did I never, ever, ever use wipes? No, sometimes I had to use wipes because I was in the middle of the airport, but I would rinse the wipes under the sink, and I would get all the crap off the wipes and just get the water and then rinse my baby's bottom under the sink. So I kind of apply the same to the residual limb. Why? Because the skin on the residual limb is about as sensitive as a baby's bottom skin, right? It's covered like a baby's bottom. It's covered in a diaper. So the residual limb is covered in some sort of plastic all day long, and it just gets sensitive. So I know people in the comments are like, but the sweat wipes are great. Guys, if it works for you, do it. I'm not the one living with your residual limb. I'm just saying that for me, I don't like wipes because I feel like it just smears stuff around. I like to just hose it off with water and dry it off that way. That's kind of my thing. But Marty's asking, is Aquaphor good? Okay, so on your skin without like putting your liner on, no, because it becomes an oil slick. And again, I learned this the hard way. What works for skin on a normal basis is not going to necessarily work for skin for an amputee wearing a prosthesis. So the primary big example is this one. When I worked in the burn trauma unit, we used cocoa butter. And it was wonderful for patients who had had third-degree burns and had grafts on their skin. Why? Because they didn't have sweat and oil glands, so their skin would get very dry and very brittle and would break open. So the cocoa butter was great moisturizer. So when I started working with amputees, I'm like, oh, I've got this great moisturizer with cocoa butter. And I put it on some of my amputees, and it was like creating an oil slick, right? So even though the cocoa butter looked like it was soaking in, the minute my amputee would put their liner on and start working a little bit, it would start sliding off. So Aquaphor is kind of the same thing, okay? If I have an amputee who has, you know, some trouble spots that we're working on, maybe we're working on a callus and getting rid of that callus at nighttime, we might put some Aquaphor on it to help soften it up and things like that. Okay, but while you're wearing the prosthesis, no, I do not recommend that you put on Aquaphor. In fact, you really shouldn't be putting anything on your skin with the exception of maybe just a little bit of that liquid to powder lotion that I mentioned earlier. And sometimes, not all the time, the Vital Fit line that I mentioned, they do have a daily moisturizer for sometimes in Florida when it gets dry in the winter. It doesn't happen too often because it's Florida, right? That particular moisturizer I find soaks in well and does not create that oil slicked effect. Again, this is where like everyone's a little bit different with what they need. But the general recommendation is when you're putting your prosthesis and liner on, there shouldn't be any lotions or potions on your skin unless your doctor directed it or anything like that, right? So Ronnie says, the wipes close your pores, very similar to Certain Dry, but much more successful, very different than cleaning wipes. I'm not familiar with those wipes myself, Ronnie. But you know, actually, Ron, if you could send me, here we go. Whoops. What did I just do there? Ooh, I don't know what I just pressed there. Ronnie, please do me a favor. If you could please send me an email and send me the name of those sweat wipes, and I want to look them up and learn more about them. And guys, this is also for all of you, especially those of you who are new to the show. Like I said, this show's for you. I'm here to answer your questions. And if I don't know the answer, which that happens a lot, I will go and find a credible resource for your answer. So you can email me directly there. I am the one who answers those emails, and I do my best to answer them within 2 business days. You can also sign up for my texting service. And guys, I am really loving using this as my way of communicating with you all. And if you have not already signed up for my texting service, I am humbly asking. I'm trying to kind of build that texting list, not because I'm going to send you spam or any kind of that nonsense, but because it is a wonderful way for me to get messages to you and for you to send me messages. And I can also send you the links to the show when I go live. So all you have to do is text COSI Talks, all one word like that in all caps, to there. And actually, I believe I completely forgot, like you guys get a discount. So when you sign up for my texting service, you'll get a discount to my Strong Body program, which is, I'm doing all sorts of plug right now, aren't I? I feel like a sponsor here. Okay, so you'll get a discount to my Strong Body program, 150 video exercises for above the knee and below the knee amputees. And there's also an above the knee book and a below the knee book that goes with it. So if you sign up for my texting service, you get a cool discount, right? Okay. All right, here we go. Checking over on Instagram. We got Paola on board. We got Brenda Skin on board. We've got Jackie on board and Alex and John Spins. We got Larry on board there as well. Awesome. Okay, I should probably look at one of these questions that came in through text message because I feel bad that we've like gotten carried away here, but this is because we're having a great talk. That's why. Ooh. Okay, Jim asks, I'm afraid I've developed some bad habits when I had the socket that was way too big for me. I have my new socket. I'm very pleased with the fit, but I'm really struggling with trying to get weight on my prosthetic leg. I put too much weight on the walker, not enough on the prosthetic. My physical therapist has shown me the proper form, but for some reason my brain doesn't want to do it. Just wondering if you had any tips for working on getting the weight to my prosthetic leg. Yes. So Jim in Ohio, I don't know if you have this, but I'm going to find there's actually, so the biggest thing, guys, and here's where sometimes if the physical therapist does not have amputee experience, they will use strategies that are more for traditional orthopedic patients and not necessarily specific to amputee patients. So Jim mentioned how the therapist was trying to teach him proper form on putting weight into his leg and not his walker. Okay, the way you approach working with an amputee as a clinician is ironically how you also start working with someone who's had a stroke. Hear me out. When a person has a stroke, right, the brain does not recognize half the body with certain kinds of strokes, right? The brain will not recognize half the body, right? You have to retrain the brain to recognize the limb that's attached to them, right? So it's the same thing with the prosthesis, right? With an amputation, the brain is not recognizing the prosthesis as its own leg. So you have to retrain the brain. And it's not just about telling a person, put a foot here, put a foot there, put a foot here, or put a foot there. Okay, you have to do certain strategies. And one of them is weight shifting. Okay, so if you go to my main website with the Strong Body program, and Jim, hopefully you're on board and you can see this. I'll put up a QR code for you. There we go. Okay. So Jim, go ahead and click that QR code on the main website, on the main page of that, one of the free videos that you can see. It shows you how to do some of these simple exercises. And some of the biggest exercises that you will do to start putting weight into your prosthesis, it's not necessarily exercises that you're walking, it's exercises that you do when you're standing still. And you do the weight-bearing exercises into the prosthesis. And in my book, I have so many of those exercises. And again, it's about retraining your brain. It's letting your brain know that that prosthesis is connected to you and it is in fact your new leg and that you can depend upon it. Okay, so there is strengthening involved. There is range of motion and stretching involved, but a lot of it has to do with cueing and retraining your sense of proprioception, your sense of your body knowing where it is in space. Okay, and the majority of those exercises are done standing still. Isn't that funny? You would think like, oh, to get my body used to walking with my prosthesis, I should be walking up and down, walking up. And it's like, no. You have to teach your body first the foundation. Okay, you'll find a lot of those in my book. I would say the weight shifting exercises, the step up exercises, the tennis ball exercises. So for those of you who have my program, those of you who are subscribed to the program and are watching those videos, you're going to find those in the balance section for both above the knee and below the knee. Okay, so weight shifting, tennis ball exercises, and what was the other one I just said? Step ups. And they're all in the same, like in progression there. So those are the ones I would recommend that you start off with. Okay, next. Oh, I hate hearing about, oh, this one makes me a little sad. Okay, Chuck says, hi, Kosi, I'm in above the knee since January 2022. I have a second neuroma in the left stump with tons of phantom pain and pain in the stump. I've been without my prosthetic leg for 2 months. I notice pain in the right knee, hip, back, and cramping in the right calf. I think I from being in the wheelchair, any suggestions on those? Thank you, Chuck. P.S. I had TMR 18 months ago and the neuroma returned. Okay. So Chuck, it sounds like you got a lot going on. So about the TMR, and guys, those of you who are kind of new to watching the show, I talk a lot about neuromas and how they can trigger phantom pain. So a neuroma is a ball of scar tissue that forms around the end of a nerve after it's been cut. So during amputation, everything gets cut, and that includes nerves. So if this ball of scar tissue forms around that nerve, it could potentially become a problem. Some neuromas do not cause pain. Other neuromas cause debilitating pain, debilitating phantom pain. There's a procedure called targeted muscle reinnervation, okay? And what that procedure does is the surgeon goes back in, it gets that ball of scar tissue, removes it from the end of the nerve, and in a simple explanation, plugs the nerve back into the muscle, okay, instead of just letting it flip-flop around in the tissue. So in plugging it into the muscle again, it's giving the nerve something to do, okay? And the nerve gets in there and gets happy. When I hear about cases where the person said I had TMR done and I had no relief, questions that I ask, and again, I'm playing Monday morning quarterback, but some questions that I would ask is, did the surgeon perhaps do TMR on the correct nerve? Okay, because like I said, you can have a neuroma, but it may not necessarily be what's causing the problem. And some nerves are more prone to causing problems than others. So asking, one of the things that you need to know is when you are being evaluated for a neuroma, when they're seeing if you're going to have a TMR procedure, one of the things that the surgeons may do is they may inject the nerve with some lidocaine, right? If they inject that neuroma with lidocaine and you feel relief, okay, that means that maybe they're on the right track of addressing the root cause of that problem. Okay, so that's one of the questions I would perhaps ask. Is TMR 100%? No, it's not. As far as the other issues with the pain that you're having, if you are using a wheelchair for a long time, then yes, you can develop pain in the joints, pain in the back. A lot of people think that because they use wheelchair for the primary source of mobility that they don't necessarily need to exercise anymore. And the opposite is true. If you're someone who's using a wheelchair to get around, yeah, you still got to do those strengthening exercises specifically to help prevent back pain, to help prevent hip pain and knee pain. Strengthening is going to help with a lot of this because it's going to give the joints the support that they need, okay? So Chuck, I think the best advice I can give you right now is to get a second opinion about the neuroma, about the one that you had taken care of, and the second neuroma that you said that you have. And what I would recommend is, okay, tmrnerve.com. So, good grief. Sorry, I'm just seeing things and I'm like, why are things popping up like that? All right, guys, I'm going to leave the QR code for just another few minutes. Go to tmrnerve.com. When you go there, it's full of wonderful patient resources, but one of the resources that they have is a list by state of the different surgeons that do TMR. Okay, so Chuck, my recommendation would be get a second opinion. Have another surgeon take a look, or even the original surgeon. Go back to that original surgeon who did your TMR and say, hey, can we take a look again and see what's going on? I have a second neuroma. Did we do the TMR on the correct nerve? And just start there. And then also a strengthening routine. Go see a physical therapist. Have them give you a general strengthening routine to take a look at this pain and the cramping that you're having and things like that while you're in the wheelchair. So you can do that program while you're in the wheelchair. Okay, let's see what else we got. Okay, so this question, so Emily asked this question. I think, Emily, we're going to leave this question for next week because there's a lot to dig into here. And I haven't really done a show on this, and I kind of want to do a good job on it. So Emily was asking, what makes an ulcer a diabetic ulcer versus a regular ulcer, other than the person who has the ulcer being diabetic? So there's a lot that we can talk about here, and it kind of piggybacks on what we started the evening talking about in terms of wounds gone wrong, right? So we're going to save that one for next week, Emily. There's a lot that we can talk about ulcers and just kind of explaining what all the wording means. And you might hear venous ulcers versus arterial ulcers. You'll hear about diabetic ulcers. So, and also like the different stages of ulcers. So we'll get into that in next week's because I want to do a good job explaining that one to you guys. All right, Charles says, I use a tube dressing as a shrinker. I fold over double and I put 4 cool packs within the 2 layers for 10 minutes. That helps keeps volume change down. I use cool chill backs in the first. I love that idea, Charles. I love that. And I love, so I call it Tubi Grip. I love Tubi Grip. I think it's absolutely wonderful. And especially like, so for example, my Joe, the person I was referencing earlier, his limb is, obviously a little bit swollen because of the infection and everything on. So, and he can't put on a shrinker when he has an active ulcer because that will just tear that area apart. But we're able to put on a nice soft Tubi Grip and we're able to stretch that on. So the Tubi Grip just provides very gentle compression to help with that swelling and get the swelling out of that area so that good circulation can get into that wound. So no, I love Tubi Grip. I think it's wonderful. So Charles is asking, any opinion about the Martin Bionics capsules BK prosthesis totally adjustable? I like adjustable technology, adjustable socket technology. My personal favorite is the Click Medical. I've been working with Click Medical for several years now. Adjustable socket technology came out on the market, I think about 10-ish years ago. And the 2 big players are Click Medical and the Martin Bionics. I think their tagline is socketless socket. And then the Click Medical has their Revo Fit. This is actually the Revo Surface, but the Revo Fit is very similar in its design. I like working with the Click Medical. That's just my personal preference. I've had patients who have done both, who have done Martin Bionics and Click Medical. I think a lot of it, actually quite a bit of it, depends on the skill of the prosthetist, that they need to know how to properly create the adjustability into that socket. Okay. I know, and again, I've not worked with Martin Bionics guys, so I can only tell you what I've learned from looking on their website and things like that. So I can talk to you more about Click Medical because, again, I've worked with them for several years. They have what's called Click Academy, where they have tons of courses on there for prosthetists and continuing education. And I think they have a fantastic support system for their clinicians for troubleshooting any issues. So I think adjustable socket technology is a wonderful option for people, especially if you're someone who struggles with limb volume changes. I think it's a fantastic option and certainly something that you should talk to your prosthetist about to see if you're a candidate. Okay, guys, I am talked out, which for this Cuban mama, that says a lot. So guys, great discussion tonight. I think y'all heard me ranting and raving at the beginning of the show, but hopefully you guys were able to have some takeaways with that in terms of what you can do to prevent skin breakdown. And, in terms of if you happen to have a skin breakdown, how you should handle that. So if you weren't able to watch the whole show, it's going to be available on Facebook. It's on my YouTube channel. I don't know if it's on TikTok. I'm still learning TikTok, guys. I'm kind of an old dinosaur, so I'm still learning about TikTok. But anyways, it's there. Guys, if you're able to, I would really appreciate it if whenever I, post on social media and anything like that, like the post, share the post. It just kind of helps spread the word out there. And I think there's a lot of need for educational resources in the amputee community. So I'm happy to throw my pebble in the pond for that. So guys, with that being said, I am going to finish the rest of my decaf hot coffee and then go take a cool shower because it is really hot here in Florida. But as always, guys, thank you for letting me be a part of your lives this evening. I will see you next week. Same bat time, same bat